the today's goal is to identify the factors that caused the Great Depression in 1929 in the United States. So that's the topic for today, and then the decision has been made based upon the Minnesota State Common Core Standard, as you see here. And then to reach the goal that we're going to use, here is, I already gave you the form that is called Question Exploration Guide, and that you're using this text material copy that is from your grade level, social study. And then here I just want to briefly introduce you about the Question Exploration Guide. To complete this form, then we are going to follow some steps. So there is a cue, do, review stage. In the cue, we briefly talk about, general expectation, how we complete this format, okay? And then do process, and then there is a strategy that we are going to use. It's called the answer, and then you already have the copy with you. So each initial has its own purpose. For example, A stands for ask a critical question, N stands for note and explain key terms, S stands for search for supporting questions and answers, W stands for work out the main idea answer, and E stands for explore the main idea in a related area, R stands for relate the idea to today's word. So we're going through this step to fill the information on this format, the step by step, okay? So, as we start, here are some expectations that I wanna tell you. So the first expectation is, I want to fill out your own question exploration guide. The second expectation is please participate in the discussion, and we are going to have a discussion to explore the question that we want to ask, and then to find the answer together through our discussion, okay? And then I want you to think about the information and ask a question, and I want you to keep all your question exploration guide and other notes in your notebook. And then please use the question exploration guide and other notes to complete your assignments and then study for your test in the future, okay? So, as a step one, here I come up with a critical question, okay? The critical questions that I have created to start our activity is right here, okay? So what is it?
What factors related to causing the Great Depression?
That's right. So right now I want you to write this critical question on number 1 on exploration guide. Now we are moving on to step 2. The step 2 is note and explain the key terms. So what are the key terms here? Any idea? Just the definition of the key terms. When it's just to say the key terms, before you look at actually the text material, do you have any idea when you hear the word key terms, like keywords?
Like something that's related to the article in a
Right.
strong way.
Yeah, you're very close. So the key terms or keywords are the word kind of very important. We actually say this is like a vocabulary word. It can be a phrase that is actually related to the critical question that I just wrote, or to have some discussion about the contents that we have in the text material. So those are the key terms that we actually have to know to understand what we are discussing and how we answer the critical question. So we just want to work together to come up with some of the key terms, and then we're gonna fill those key terms on the left hand on the number 2 on the format, okay? So what is the critical question we have? So we have the critical question, what factors related to causing the Great Depression? So to answer this critical question, So what's some of the key terms that we need to understand within the question?
Great Depression.
All right, the Great Depression. So we already know the great, the meaning, right? It's about the size, right? There's a grande, like in Spanish. It means like a big or huge, but you also have to understand the depression. You know the depression has a lot of different meaning. It changes the meaning depending on the context, right? So what's the meaning for the depression in this context?
Like a time of slow loss.
Time, and then the slow. You know, what is the slow, for example, the depression in this context?
Long lasting, like low lasting, like bad economy.
Oh, bad economy. I think it's a really good term. So I'm gonna just change a little bit. So we have to know one word. So the key term is depression. So if we define the term depression, so I want to write this word on the left side of the phone, number 2. It is a time when there is little economy activity and which cause a lot of job loss and poverty. Okay. So, did you finish writing down? Okay. So, what are the other key terms that we can think of? As you know, if I look at the first page here, I see the heading below the Great Depression, the stock market mania. So, we probably have to know the stock market, right? Or the stock exchange, right? Or stock market or stock exchange. And we also have to know mania, right? So I'm gonna just write down here, stock market. Okay. So any idea about the stock market or stock exchange?
A place where shares and corporations
Yeah.
are bought and sold.
So it's a
Yeah.
it's a place. Okay, so it is a place. So please write down the definition and where shares in corporations are bought and sold through organized system. Okay. So, and what about mania? Are you familiar with this word, mania?
Mania. It's like it can be used as crazy or a lot.
Okay. So mania has also several different meaning. So generally, like in this context, right? This is happening in our society, right? So you said what word?
Crazy or a lot.
Okay, so I'm gonna say crazed as a noun because the mania is a noun. Okay. Craze, maybe in another word, I can say like a big trend. Okay. Sure you know class. What about like the word like a default? Are you familiar with the word default?
Yes.
Okay, so what about we just write one more word here, default. So if you're familiar with this word, can you tell?
Default is like a mistake.
Okay. Stake.
A mistake, or like, I don't know the other word used to describe it, but
Okay.
when something goes wrong.
Okay, something goes wrong. Okay. It sounds like, making failure, right? So yeah, that's a good word. That's a good description. Making failure for what, for example, right? If that is in the economic situation.
Kind of situation.
Making failure.
Like a default into your investment, like making a mistake in investing in something.
Yeah.
The amount
If they fail with their investment, what happens then?
they lose money.
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. So to fail. Let's just move on to, because we just did talk about some of the key terms that are very important that we need to understand to have some discussion about this topic, and then to try to answer our critical question, which is what factors related to causing the Great Depression. Okay. So we are heading toward the number 3. The number 3 step is stands for S, search for supporting questions and answers. So as we move on to this stage, let's just based upon the text evidence, right? So you must be familiar with the text evidence, right? So that's the information that we actually can find from this material. So on the first page, I come up with, for example, I see actually the heading, the stock market mania, and then I also see another heading here, the market boom, right? So from this context, I actually kind of think of what actually made people, right, invest the stock market. Okay, so whenever I just come up with one supporting question, I try to use one of these WH word. So these 4 WH word, who, what, when, and where, usually give us like a very specific information. And then whenever we create a question like a why and a how, it just gives us kind of like a deeper understanding of a certain topic. So just looking at these 2 titles, the headings on the first page, I can just show one example. One question that I want to ask as a supporting question here, why did, make sure that you also write this question on your part. Why did people invest in the stock market? So here's the first question, and then to answer this question, we're gonna just briefly read the first paragraph, and then just to find out if we could answer this question or not. Okay, so can you read the first paragraph? Yeah.
For much of the 1920s, the United States economy was a great success story. Leaders declared that the nation had entered a new era, brink of a crisis.
Okay, thank you. So here so far with this information, can you answer this question with the information that is given in the first paragraph?
Yes.
Do you find any text evidence?
Yes.
Okay.
It said that buying stock or investing
Mm-hmm.
would be using money in hopes of making more money.
Okay.
So they wanted to make more money.
But does it answer like why did people invest? Why? Was there any reason?
No.
What about like the there was like the head of General Motors,
Mm-hmm.
and then told the people to buy stocks. And then he said buying stock is a way of investing and using money in hopes of making more money. That's what he said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened after that?
People followed his advice.
Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of one text evidence that because the head of General Motors said something about investing the money into the stock market. So I'm gonna just write one piece of information because this is good text evidence to answer this question. So I'm gonna just write here, many people followed the advice by the head of, I'm gonna just write GM here, so GM stands for General Motors, to buy stocks. Alright, so and also we find that another like information that is interesting, kind of like a little bit intriguing. They're the people. What are the people who actually invested in the stock market?
A bunch of different people.
Okay, for
mostly
example.
working people like grocers
Mhm.
and motormen,
Mhm.
plumbers, seamstresses, and waiters.
Yeah. So just think about their occupation background. Do you actually think that at the time people were making good money to invest their money into the stock market?
No, probably not.
Probably not, because we don't actually see like the lawyer or doctors and business owner or maybe accountants. If their occupations are like those kind of professional job, we can easily think of they have enough salary to actually invest some of their income in the stock market. But looking at these people, yeah, we don't really think that they really have enough money, but somehow they invested their money in the stock market. So one critical question, what question you want to ask them based on this piece of information?
I don't know.
Okay, it's kind of curious, right? How did they have the money to invest in the stock market, right? So why don't we just ask the question, for example, like how did the people with low income buy stocks? Okay, I'm gonna just write one more question here. So please write this question on the left side. Okay, so probably we don't have the information to answer this question. Maybe we wanna go on to the one more paragraph. This time I'm just going to read this paragraph. We're gonna just switch our tone to be fair. The market boom. A stock exchange is a system for buying and selling stock. Shares of a corporation. Okay, I just finished this part of the paragraph. Do you find any information that actually could answer this question? How did people with a low income buy stocks?
It said that many investors bought stocks on margin,
Mm-hmm.
and this meant that they borrowed money to buy stock.
Mm-hmm. So, and then there is more example. What is like buying stock on margin, right? So, for example, one person had only $2 in cash, and then could buy a stock that is valued with $10 by borrowing $8 for the rest, and then just see how it goes, And then if the stock price goes up, and that's a good deal, right? But if the stock price goes down, probably the person has to lose money, right? So that explains, right? So I can probably we can answer this question probably by saying here, Okay, so many bought. Okay, so and then we also find little more information about the first question that we can actually add more information, not just hearing the advice from, the head of the GM. The only reason that people decided to buy stock, invest their money into the stock market was because in the late 1920s, the value of the stock went up and up, right? So I'm gonna just add one more sentence here. This is another text evidence in the late 1920s. Okay, and after that, we also have the next heading, right? What's the next heading?
Market crash.
Market crash. So hearing this word, the crash means
It's a drop.
yeah, to drop, right? So we want to actually know, okay, then there was a crash. Then what happened to the investors then, right?
They lost money.
Yeah, probably right. So we want to find more about what happened then, okay? So the next question, probably you want to ask.
How did the market crash affect
Okay.
investors?
You're not worrying about people who invest the money,
The investors.
okay? Then probably you want to ask what?
How it hurt the people.
Okay. Let's say how the market crash. Okay, thank you. So far, based upon what we just read, do you have any text evidence to support and answer the question that we have created?
Kind of.
Okay.
Sorry, let me find it again. I can't find the exact text, but
Okay.
the more investors that sold their stocks, the more the market began to crash and the prices
Okay.
lessened.
So I want to ask you, do you generally understand why it has to happen? Like when people begin to selling more stocks, then and then what happens? Like that means there are more shares, right, that are available to be purchased, but people don't buy those the stocks anymore, right? And that's why the price remains just very low, and it never increased. But why did they start selling the shares?
Because some
Do we have some information?
Yes.
Okay.
In 1929, some investors began to worry that the stock prices were set to fall.
Oh, okay. And then they eventually, after that?
Sold their stocks.
Right. Okay. So that's what happened. Okay, that's a really good answer. Some investors. Okay, what about here? Like we have very important information can answer the situation more. So once they begin to sell their stock, if we have a text information here, those who lent money to investors got nervous. Okay, and they began demanding that borrowers repay their loans. To do this, more people sold more stock. I think this is very critical information that the reason that actually pushed more people to sell their stock, because the lenders, for example, like the banks, they wanted to get their money back after they lent money, right? So people are kind of being pushed. Okay, so I don't have the money, then I have to sell my stocks then to repay to the banks, right? So that's what happens. So I'm gonna just add more information. The lenders. So lenders here are like banking or credit companies. Lenders demanding. Right. So we move on to the next page. Okay, so I still heading here. The Great Depression begins. It seems like it has already started, and we just talk about one information. We just talk about
What happened during the beginning?
the beginning, and then specifically, the bad thing happens where, in what area?
The economy.
Yeah, the economy has a lot of different the activities, right?
Stock.
Yeah,
The stock market.
Yeah, we just talk about the stock market, right? We just talk about there are a lot of people, no matter their income is high or low, people just got into investing their money, right? And then they anticipated making some money. However, did it go well? No, it didn't go well. So, because there might be some situation the outside of the United States, because as a matter of fact, the outside influence from the European continent. It was after World War One, and then the stock prices in Europe actually fell down a lot at the time, and because they had the Germany had a depression because they were not able to pay their debt after they lost the war, and that actually brought a huge repercussion to the rest of the countries in Europe, and then that's why the investors, some investors who are more like expert anticipated the stock price would fall down in US, and they began to sell, and then the other people joined, and then the banks they kind of fearful, to push other people to repay. That's what happened. Okay, so I see the economic weakness here. It seems like it's not just happening in the stock market, but even in the other area, because we have the economy that actually intertwine with many different aspects. Like what kind of economic activity do we have? When you talk about the condition of the economy, we talk about not just the stock market. What else we also talk about? Generally, I'm asking your background information.
Generally, just regular stores or
like a spending money,
like spending money,
like a consumption,
places, and eating out consumption, and using your money for your own personal benefit.
We talk about investment, right? There's investment in stock market, and then there's investment in housing market,
and in just personal health as well, clothes, shelter.
And then rather than we just spend the money, and then when you talk about, oh, our economy is really good, and we also talk about what else?
I'm blanking, sorry. I'm blanking,
Okay.
don't know.
So don't you also talk about when you sometimes watch news? I don't think you probably watch news a lot. But, I watch news, and then the president of the United States always talk about it. He's touting, oh, we added thousands of jobs in the first quarter, something like that, and then the unemployment rate is the lowest ever in American history. So even though there's some exaggeration, but yeah, we talk about unemployment rate, right? How many people are employed? Or what about the income equality? Even though the economic situation is really good, and there's also another concern because the people's average wage actually not really catching up. The inflation. The inflation is, any idea about the inflation?
Growing.
Yeah, the economy grows, but at the same time, when the economy grows, also the consumer's price go up at the same time, and then the people's income have to actually catch up at a certain point. And otherwise, if the people just make the same amount of money while the prices go up, then their life condition probably will be poorer, right? Yeah. So there are a lot of aspects that when you talk about the economic condition. So here it seems like the economic weakness is just giving us some information about, like it's not just about the stock market, and then we also have to talk about some of the area, for example, like what about the industry and business? Okay, so probably we can create a question: what happened to the industry? So we'll just figure out if we can find some text evidence after reading the next section. I'm gonna read. So, what happened to the industry in the late 1920s? Do we have any text evidence that can answer this question?
Yes. Later in the decade, factories found they were turning out more goods than people could buy. So
There we
they
go.
were wasting money
Mhm.
by making more supplies than there was a demand for.
Right. So that was a critical problem. So just like you say, it was found that the factories, so that like the auto industry and the construction industry, they also suffered, right? And we actually found another critical information because we something heard about. We generally talk about the income inequality, right? So this is one factor. So one critical question was like, how was the income? So how was that? We have information to answer this question too, right?
In 1929, less than 1% of the population owned
Mhm.
nearly 33% of the country's wealth, and
Mhm.
many American families lived in poverty or close to it.
Yeah, that's right. So that's exactly the information that actually can answer this question. So let's write down the answer. Is there any question that we can think of that is critical, supporting question?
How did the banking and credit crisis
Mm-hmm.
affect people
Okay.
during this time?
How banking and credit, how banking and credit businesses what's the next part that you said?
How did banking and credit crisis affect the people during this time?
Okay. Failure affected. Okay. So, is there any other questions that we can also create? We also have another heading, other nations affected.
I could ask how other nations were affected
Okay,
by the Great Depression.
okay. How about the situation of the outside? Okay. Anything else? With the third heading, joblessness spreads. So with this heading, what kind of supporting question can you come up with?
How did
Joblessness means spread. That means it never stop, right? That means people cannot find another job after they lose their job. Is it right? because joblessness spreads. So it happens like sometimes people lose their job because one business, they fail their business and then it doesn't go well. Sometimes they make a decision to lay off the people, and then if the business, if the economy is not really bad, people lose their job, they can go back to finding another job. But from the heading, the joblessness spreads. It seems like people were not able to find another job after they lose their job. Is right. Then what about we ask a question here? Why couldn't people find another job? It's a good question, maybe. Okay. So maybe we want to talk about how was the employment rate and why couldn't people find another job? Okay. Right, so let's figure out if we can answer this question based on what we have in this page. Okay, so
I'm just finishing this.
yeah, just look at me when you're ready. Oh, you're writing pretty fast. Go ahead, please read.
Banking and credit crisis. Borrowed money fueled much of the 1920s economy. Farmers bought land, equipment, banks were gone.
Okay, so as of now, is there any information that we can put to answer the first question that we created?
Yes, it said
Okay.
thousands of banks closed between 1930 and 1933,
Mm-hmm.
and when the banks collapsed,
Mm-hmm.
millions of people lost the money and the savings that they'd put in the banks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here then, that's good information. Then let's put the information here. Okay, so the next heading that we have is other nations affected. I'm going to read. In 1930, Congress passed the Holy Smooth Tariff. A tariff is a tax for American business. Okay, so from this information, can you answer this question?
Yes.
Okay.
Said, the Holly Smoot tariff raised the price of goods purchased from other countries, and as a result,
Mm-hmm.
Americans bought fewer of these goods.
Mm-hmm.
This
And
hurt the
then?
foreign countries because
Okay.
they lost money.
Okay. So yeah, the foreign countries are affected by the United States because of the tariff. But was there any counter effect after that?
They responded by raising their own tariffs
Mhm.
on our products,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually raised their money back up because they purchased fewer American goods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like, sounds like they had a trade war. Something that is going on in this day, right? So I'm gonna just slightly modify the question here, because it sounds like, do you remember we talk about, why American people, the American business factories, they overproduce the goods, right? However, they couldn't come up with selling and exporting those goods, overproduced good, outside of the United States. I wanted to ask why. Why weren't they just able to sell all of their overproduced goods, selling them to other countries, right? But we find the answer to this critical question. Because why? Because they had a trade war, right? So I'm just writing here the question different way. Why didn't companies and farmers sell more To answer this question, I'm gonna just brief the answer. So we just talk about the tariffs back and forth, right? It started from where? First the tariff.
Us passing the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which raised the price of goods purchased.
So that tariff, you said is a Hawley-Smoot tariff, right? It started from where?
Congress.
Yeah, the U.S. Congress, right? And then there was a counter tariff from where?
Foreign countries.
Yeah, from foreign countries. So I would just say there were trade war. Okay, so we have to read the next paragraph. So it's your turn.
Joblessness spreads. By 1932.
So far with the information that we just read, was there any text evidence that we can put here for the answer to this question?
How was the employment rate? It said that about the employment rate remained near 20% throughout the 1930s, and about 25% of American workers were out of work.
By when?
By 1932.
Yeah, I think this is a peak time. So I'm just gonna put here by 1932. About 25% of Americans. Okay, then I have one answer here, and then the next question: why couldn't people find another job? Why? Can you answer this question?
I don't think in this.
Okay.
Paragraph.
Yeah, we don't have the text information on this paragraph, but I think we do have the information to answer this question. So far, we just finished step 3. Then we are moving on to the step 4 finally. So this is a long process, I know. So the step 4, work out the main idea answer. So the main idea answer is the answer to the critical question. I mean the critical question that we put, right? The critical question was what? Can you read?
What factors related to causing the Great Depression?
Right. So that was the critical question. Now we have to answer to this question based on all information that we just wrote. To our supporting question. But to answer this question, please be aware that we're not putting all the information, right? Because there are lots of information that we wrote. So when you answer to this question, it's going to be just one sentence. So how do you make it happen? What do you have to do?
You have to reduce the answers to the most important information.
So in one word, what do we say? In one word. It starts with the letter S.
Summarize.
Yeah, we summarize. So we summarize the information. Summarize what?
The most important.
No, we
summarize all of the information that we learned.
Right, we summarize all the answers to
one sentence.
No, we summarize all the answers to because we create a lot of answers, right? Answers to
one main answer.
No, we have created a lot of questions, right? Those are what questions? Can you go back and then check what questions?
Supporting questions.
Yeah, because we made a lot of supporting questions, right? And then we answered those questions, right? So we eventually have to summarize what? The answers to?
The supporting questions.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so that's what you have to do. So I know it's kind of, challenging task, but I can give you one scaffolding. And it's like the sentence starter to create an answer to the critical question that we studied, okay? The critical question was what factors are related to the cause of the Great Depression, right? So that was the critical question. So to answer the questions to the critical question, I'm going to start my answer the Great Depression was caused by, okay, so this is a sentence starter, okay, and then let's keep going. So we have to summarize just in one word, okay, into one word. What's just a perfect word to describe, to summarize all information with the first two answers to supporting question? We talk about, right? In the first two supporting question, we talk about what?
Investment.
Right, stock investment, right? And then what happened to their investment?
It was a default because the
Default?
stock prices plummeted.
Plummeted. So so we just want to use one word.
Caused by default.
Default? Default is just a perfect word?
No.
Okay, so it could be like a compound word. You know the compound word. Compound word is just like used as one word, but made with 2 or 3 words. It's called a compound word. I'm gonna just use like a stock market crash. Okay, the stock market crash caused by. Let's use the stock market crash caused by the stock market crash, comma. And then the next question that we created, right? What is the next critical question? I mean, the supporting question that we talked.
How did the market crash impact on the investors?
No. The next question, we just talk about those first two, right? What is the third question?
What happened to the industry in the late 1920s?
Okay, so that's right. So what happened?
Factories were producing more goods than
Right.
people could
Okay,
buy.
that was like a critical situation, right? So is there any one word that we can just summarize? They produced more goods, right, than it was needed.
So like overproducing?
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I was actually at the same word. So overproduction. And let's move on to the next part. So what was the next supporting question that we had and then talk about?
How was the income quality?
Right. So how was that?
Less than 1% of the population
Mhm.
owned nearly 33% of the country's wealth. When many
Yeah, that's very
people
detailed
lived-
information that we have to summarize that information in just 1 or 2 words. 1 or 2 words. Maybe 2 words. Or yeah, it could be 3 words.
I think, is it income inequality?
What kind of income inequality? Was kind of mediocre, or like
High,
lot, right?
large.
Okay, large. Okay, so I'm gonna use massive. Okay, massive income inequality. Period. And then what is the next question that we came up with and then discussed?
How did banking and credit failure affect people in the late 1920s?
Okay. So that was the information, right? So what's good 1 word or 2 word, 1 or 2 good words that we can summarize?
Credit failure.
Credit failure is perfect. Yeah. Credit failure or bank failure. Let's use just a bank instead. Bank or maybe credit failure. And then, was there any situation? What question did he come up with next?
How did the situation affect outside countries?
Mm-hmm.
And
Then,
why didn't companies sell more overproduced goods to other countries?
mm-hmm. Why?
There was a trade war based on tariffs between America and other nations.
That's right. So, using just two or three words, just a noun, what are good 2 or 3 words to describe the whole situation here?
Tariffs and trade wars.
Okay, the trade war. I buy the trade wars, right? So, trade wars, international trade wars, because it's happening between nations, right? International trade wars. Probably this is the last piece. Not last piece. International trade war. And the last one that we talked.
How was the unemployment rate and
Mhm.
why? And why couldn't they find another job?
Mm-hmm. So what is just the situation, whole situation, to describe within 1 or 2 words?
Large unemployment.
Okay.
Or increasing employment or unemployment.
Okay. High on employment. Okay. Okay. So everything happens where? When did it happen? All these things happens when?
Late 1920s
Okay.
through the 1930s.
Okay.
Beginning 1930s.
Perfect. So we can just put the information here in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Okay. Yeah, I know this is a lot of words, but this is still one sentence. Can you see that? It's one sentence. Yeah. So, all right, we just finished the step 4, and then we're moving to step 5. So the step 5 is to explore the main idea in a related area. So which means, like, how can you use the main idea? The main idea was
That the Great Depression was caused by stark market crash, overproduction, massive income inequality, bank failure, international trade wars, and high unemployment in the late 1920s and early 1930s.
Yeah, so we just learned that these are the all factors that are related to the condition of the economy, right? So if there's any failure in this area, and we know that we can anticipate, we may have really bad economic situation in the country, right? So that's something that we have realized and learned this time. So based on what you learned, do you remember, was there any like a difficult time economically lately in America after Great Depression? Not that you know?
Not that
Okay.
I know there's something, but I just can't remember exactly when, because I think it
You
was
don't
a while
remember when?
ago.
What year were you born?
2006.
2006, okay. Probably you don't remember anything were going on around 2008?
No, that's why I said there was something.
Okay.
Can't remember what it was.
So actually there is another term called the Great Recession. So Great Recession is the words they used to describe the economic situation at the time. Because we also had, America has really had a really bad time with the economy. The same thing, the stock market crashed. And then lots of people lost their jobs. And then there was also housing market crash at the time. So to connect the real life information, I want to give you just one. You're not going to do this time because it's very long and then you're tired, I'm tired too. So this is kind of, the assignments with your interest. So that's an article from the history website, and they give you the summary of Great Recession. So what I want you to understand, because we followed the 5 different steps, and then we discussed and then worked together to complete the question exploration guide form, and then you can definitely use that the article, read an article, and you can probably de-underline the information. And actually, with the headings inside an article, you can come up with some of the supporting questions that you can actually create to answer the most critical question that you want to actually ask. So we can pretty much do the same thing with an article. And then after that, what you can do is we can probably compare the information between the finding of the Great Depression today and then the findings of like what caused the Great Recession in 2007 and 8. So we can probably compare, were there any kind of similarity like at the time, and then in 1929. So that's some connection that we can actually make. And then I want to move on to the next step, relate the idea to today's work. And then if you look at number 6, and we have a question, is there an over idea? So what's an over idea first?
Something that kind of covers everything.
Okay. Covered everything. For example, like what did it learn? Like to answer, by answering question, the critical question, what did it learn?
I learned that, kind of I'm using the same word, overall, just having one sort of thing start, it can affect many other things.
Okay, there were.
Kind of go into a cycle of just.
Is there any good word? Like, what about, do you know word chain reaction?
Chain reaction.
Yeah, chain reaction, right.
Everything else is going to happen.
Right. So, yeah. So, probably I want to say like, stocks, market, because this is what you talk about, production, consumption is another one, because people bought less amount of goods because after they lost their job. Trade policy, and employment, are key factors. We talk about the factors, right? There are intertwined and cause huge impact on the economy. So if there's one problem and then there's another problem that happens in another area, right? That's what he actually learned. And then is there any real world use? Like if I ask a question like, so do you find any commonality in one of these categories, like in stock market, production, consumption, trade policy, employment, or even like income inequality? Is there any commonality that you actually feel these days? Anything?
It's not really like huge world thing exactly, but like just example in like the town we live in, there's stores that overproduce or over invest or buy something, and they're like supply and demand. They have a lot of supply, but there's not very much demand, so they end up losing money and their business fails.
Okay, so you actually see that situation in local area. Anything that you heard about, like fear about, like, do the income equality is kind of fair these days?
Yeah. Like, I think I'm using this right. Like, Nancy Pelosi
Mm-hmm.
cuts down these. Can't remember the word. Cuts down
Mm-hmm.
a financial budget
Mm-hmm.
for is it Special Olympic?
Oh, is it?
You mean
Oh wait, maybe not Nancy Pelosi. Somebody.
no.
She's a House Speaker.
No, you're talking about the education secretary, Betsy DeVos.
Oh yeah. Oh that.
Yeah.
Betsy DeVos.
Yeah.
Cuts down
Uh-huh.
education, I think, to use the money for themselves or for the government, and that kind of shows that people are getting maybe a not as well education,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they're even losing money from that because they're not like getting the impact they need when the more wealthy people are just earning or getting more money
Mm-hmm.
while our wealth drops.
Okay. Like you were saying that the reason behind the scenes she's trying to cut the budget for Special Olympic, for example. I heard that that's about like $38 million. That's a huge amount of money to think about the entire budget for the education, but it's not just the whole part. Actually, the current administration has proposed the next year's budget cutting $7.1 billion in education. But there are a lot of proposers trying to cut the budget for every like different federal agencies. And you mentioned that like trying to benefit the worst people. Yeah, why do you think that they're benefiting from that situation, like by cutting the budget?
Because I think they're benefiting because it's going towards, I think, their salary.
Okay.
Or somewhat, they're taking some of the money out of this education and Special Olympics, and it's going towards their salary and what they do, which is raising their money and lowering the importance of this education.
Okay. So basically, like they're trying to cut the budget because the budgets are collected from taxpayers' money, right? Everybody pay taxes, right? And they're finding out they have to reduce the budget because they're not collecting enough taxes. Why? Yeah, ever any news about like a tax situation? Okay, that's fine. But we just talk about what you want today, because we can always compare, what happens in the late 1920s, right? And then we can always check that if the similar things happening today's world, right? If, for example, in the stock market, if there is a massive, stock purchase, even though people are not really having enough money, but the bank just give the, really a lot of, the credits and loans products, even though a lot of people are not having, good credit history or background, if there's something similar happening or not, we don't know, but we can always check, and then we can always be allotted, if that's going on, then we can. We really have to think about seriously, because we may have the same problem in the future. But we just run that what actually caused the Great Depression in the 1920s. Okay, so right, so that's my kind of assignment that I give you, that you can just check, if there is any similarity or not. So I want to just go back quickly, just to debrief what he did today. We used the question exploration guide today. The reason that we used it is because it actually helps you a lot to run answer important question that is related to any class. So not just the the social study, we can use this form, even with the English class or with the science class, with any subject area, whenever you wanna answer the critical question, the most important question, how we did that. Because we went through the step. The second step was we talk about?
Explaining key terms.
Right, so we always have to make sure that before we start the reading, we have to know some of the important words, because the word has a lot of different meaning, but it changes the meaning depending on the context. For example, like a depression, in a general life, when you talk about I have a depression, what it talks about?
Talks about mental depression.
Right, but we use the depression word in this textbook. When you talk about Great Depression, what does that mean, the depression?
It means an economical
Right.
depression.
Right, economic failure, right? So it has a totally different meaning, but we always have to talk about what some of the key terms actually mean in the context. So that's what he did, and then after that, what he did after that, in the third step.
We searched for supporting questions and
Mhm.
answered those.
Right, so we created those questions, that may be related to answering the critical question, and then we found the information based on the text that we used. So we used the text evidence to answer those questions. And then what did you do after that?
We worked out the main idea answers, or
Mhm.
answer using the supporting questions and answers.
Right, so we summarized, right, all the answers that we answered to supporting question, and then created just a one sentence, right? One sentence. And then the benefit was this way we always, the memorize very detailed of the content information we discussed. And then it really helps. It really helps to remember all the detail information, not just memorizing the detailed information, but it also helps us to make a connection, all this information, to finalize those information to answer the most important critical question, right? That's the benefit of using this format and the strategy. Okay, so yeah, your the assignment is to do the same thing and then try to use the form with the article that I just gave you, and that's all. Thank you very much.